Well, good morning everyone. Welcome to Eagle Farm Racecourse during our winter carnival. A very special week this week as well in racing as we run up to the Stradbroke. Can I acknowledge the presence here today of the Minister for Racing, Grace, Brendan Parnell, the CEO of Racing Queensland, Adam Reitenskild, the CEO of Tabcorp, and Lizzie King, who's the CEO of the Toowoomba Turf Club. Queensland is a big place and our budgets are all about delivering for Queenslanders wherever they live. It's why I announced $334 million in additional support for the Royal Flying Doctor Service last Friday to give that organisation the funding certainty it needs to deliver essential medical, particularly emergency medical services to Queenslanders wherever they live in the state. It's why I announced funding yesterday, $40 million to support koala research, treatment and protection, as well as support for research and protection of endangered species across Queensland. And today we make another announcement to provide funding certainty to a very important industry for Queensland. The racing industry directly employs 6,500 people. There are over 43,000 Queenslanders who participate in the industry. And there are another 675,000 Queenslanders who attend race meetings across our state each year. And that's a very important thing. There are 125 race clubs in Queensland, 125 racing clubs spread across the length and breadth of our state. In 2/3 of those community, the race meeting, particularly the big annual race meeting, is the biggest or the second biggest event in that community. So that's the importance of racing to Queensland. And on those big days, 85 out of those 125 race meetings, the community comes together. The community comes together through racing. And so today we're going to announce some funding support for racing in Queensland. But that activity can only continue if racing has funding certainty in the future. And that's what we'll be providing today. Since 2014, the funding of Racing Queensland has been tied to the success of the TAB. But the nature of betting has changed significantly since 2014. We've seen the influx of new online betting companies. We see that almost every night in ads on our television and also ads that pop up on our phone. The existing point of consumption betting tax catches some of that growing revenue, but not enough to make up for what they are taking away from the TAB and from racing in Queensland. So today we're announcing a new 5% levy on top of the point of consumption tax in Queensland. Every cent of that levy, every cent that is raised through that levy will go back to racing in Queensland. And we're going to turn up the dial on how much money is provided to Racing Queensland through the point of consumption tax. We're going to lift it from 35% to 80% of all revenue generated through the point of consumption betting tax in Queensland. This is about levelling the playing field when it comes to betting operators in Queensland and ensuring companies that are making profits, companies that are profiting out of our vital and growing racing industry pay their fair share and invest into the future of racing. We forecast this will put about $80 million a year into Racing Queensland, replacing all other sources of revenue and doing so on a much broader, more sustainable basis. So as that taxation pie grows, so will the revenue that goes to racing, particularly rural and regional racing. This will provide a certain, stable, secure funding support for racing in Queensland, and I'm so pleased that our regional, rural and remote racing clubs and race meets will benefit from this. Now, online betting companies, some of them are based in the Northern Territory, but many of them are large multinational organisations. Some of them won't like this, but because we are removing TAB's exclusive rights to sponsorship at Queensland racing events, this provides the perfect opportunity for those online betting companies to prove their commitment to Queensland racing and to country racing in particular by getting on board and sponsoring race meetings right across the state. This is not a tax on punters, it is a levy on big online betting companies. We know they have deep pockets, and now is their opportunity to commit and to fund racing across our state. I might hand over to Minister Grace to say a few words, and then we'll have Brendan say a few words from the perspective of Racing Queensland, Adam from the perspective of Tabcorp, and Lizzie from Toowoomba. We thank Lizzie for coming down today. She'll say a little bit about the benefits this will provide for country racing in particular.
And thank you, Treasurer. And it's, as Racing Minister, always a pleasure to work with the Treasurer, particularly when we make a sustainable announcement like this for the racing industry here in Queensland. This is really a step in the right direction. It provides the financial security for Racing Queensland to be able to work with the industry in the state. Racing Queensland can concentrate on growing the industry. We're a $1.9 billion industry now. We've grown over 50% since the Palaszczuk government got elected. The bigger this industry grows, this new 80% of the point of consumption tax will enable that pie to grow also, so we can invest it back into the industry. I know that Adam from Tabcorp is very happy because this sets a level playing field, and Tabcorp now can get on with the business of working with Racing Queensland, with the industry here in Queensland, knowing that as they grow, so too will the industry grow here in Queensland as well. And also, as part of this announcement, we've got sustainable funding that will be incorporated for country racing. And I know Lizzie from the Toowoomba Turf Club will be very happy to know that country racing will continue to thrive as it has throughout Queensland since we've been elected. And as the Treasurer said, we know often a racing meet is the biggest event on the calendar for the year in that particular town. The Palaszczuk government has stepped up and supported the industry with our country racing package. This will now be incorporated into this amount that is now going to be a sustainable way forward for the industry. The exciting thing about this is we're extending the levy now. It will be at the 20% mark. It will include bonus bets and betting taxes, so the pie grows bigger, and 80% of it will be going back to the industry, which I'm sure is great news for all concerned in racing right throughout Queensland. It ticks all the boxes. As Racing Minister, I'm very happy, Treasurer. So it's very good to see. It's sustainable, it's long term. It allows us now to continue our infrastructure spend on the Gold Coast, the Greyhound track, on harness tracks, on upgrading Eagle Farm, and I look forward to working with Racing Queensland, Tabcorp, and of course our wonderful country racing industry to continue the great work we've done in racing in Queensland over the past few years. Brendan, Racing Queensland.
Thank you, Grace. Treasurer and Minister, it's fitting that Queensland Day is the day we're announcing a major change in funding of racing in Queensland after two Queensland trainers won Group 1s the last 2 weekends, and today a strategic and substantial shift in the wagering market will take place with this new racing levy to underpin racing. With great thanks to the Palaszczuk government for its ongoing support of racing in Queensland, this will enable us to increase our investment in infrastructure and industry funding, and as the Treasurer mentioned, racing is the biggest or second biggest event in 85 communities around the Sunshine State. Be it the Magic Millions on the Gold Coast or the Melbourne Cup of the Outback in Birdsville each year, it brings people together, and this will give us the security to invest in infrastructure, jobs, and not just metropolitan areas, as Lizzie will talk to shortly. Regional Queensland will see the benefit from these investments. We expect the new legislation to take effect from later this year, and we'll be announcing what funding impacts and new investment plans in coming months. I'll hand over to Adam now from Tabcorp.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Treasurer, and thank you, Minister. Well, this really is a historic day, and it's a shot in the arm for the Queensland industry. Racing is hugely better off as foreign-owned bookies pay their fair share of taxes and fees in Queensland. Tab is Australian born and bred. Tab's been your local for decades, and this levels the playing field in Queensland for Tab. It's great for Queensland communities that Tab operates in, great for pubs, great for clubs, great for local and small business, it's great for racetracks right around the state. And a stronger tab is great for punters as well. I just want to thank the Palaszczuk government. Thank you for your foresight in introducing these reforms. They are fair, but more importantly, they're fantastic for racing. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. The Toowoomba Turf Club is a proud and traditional provincial race club in the southeast of Queensland. It's one of the largest training centres in Queensland. I think it's just behind these guys here at Eagle Farm. We've got 90 plus trainers that use Clifford Park, home of the Toowoomba Turf Club, for training each and every day. We're the home of twilight racing, and certainly Toowoomba and the Darling Downs is absolutely the heartland of racing in Queensland. We've got some of the biggest breeders, some fantastic trainers and wonderful facilities. And what this new announcement means, not only for the Toowoomba Turf Club, not only for these beautiful big metropolitan clubs as well, but certainly for provincial and smaller country clubs, it's a game changer. If we're able to access more funding, that just means the facilities that we can provide, not only our stakeholders but also our guests, is absolutely fantastic. So to the Treasurer and the Minister and also Racing Queensland, thank you so very, very much. We're very excited about this announcement today. We're also excited about our big day of the year, which is the Wheatwood, coming up on the 24th of September. And as certainly the Treasurer and the Minister said, definitely that day is the big day in Toowoomba. Most of you would be familiar with the Carnival of Flowers every year. That runs for 3 weeks. That is the biggest, I guess, economic cash driver for Toowoomba. However, Wheatwood, one day, we're just behind. So it is fantastic. We're looking forward to it, and certainly this will all assist. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Treasurer, can you elaborate? You said this wasn't a tax on punters. How will that work? How do you ensure that big betting agencies don't pass the cost on to punters?
Well, we can't. What happens is that the tax is applied at the point that the bet's paid. But if it was to be passed on, it would be a minimal impact. But ultimately, we've got to provide certainty to racing clubs. Who needs the Melbourne Cup when you've got the Wheatwood? We need to provide that funding certainty, which is exactly what we're doing. You said 80 million extra? We anticipate it will generate $80 million a year to go to Racing Queensland. Beg your pardon? How much does the state go? Nothing. All this money goes to racing. So not 1 cent of the levy comes to the state. It doesn't help us with our bottom line. It doesn't fund any election commitments. It's a levy, a specific purpose levy that we're applying to support racing, because the current funding arrangement is no longer fit for purpose. That's just the reality. The funding arrangement and the relationship that was entered into in 2014 has effectively been undermined by online bookmakers. And so we want to make sure that they make their fair contribution to Queensland, they make their fair contribution to Queensland racing. And so the levy that we will apply will then go back to racing. It is historic. This really provides a substantive and substantial funding mechanism for racing in Queensland, one that they've never really had previously, and that will provide the certainty that the industry needs so they can invest and grow in the future, particularly in regional parts of our state.
Why has it taken so long?
Well, it's a complicated, it's obviously it is a complicated taxation system, but also there's a relationship and an agreement between Tabcorp and Racing Queensland. We had to work through those details, and I want to thank Brendan, Steve Wilson as well as Tabcorp for working through all those issues. That's taken some time, but that's now resolved. That's now going to be put to one side, and so all participants in racing, whether it be betting, but more importantly owners, strappers, trainers, every participant has that certainty going forward.
Currently 65% of the betting tax revenue doesn't go to the racing industry. Where does it go, and how will you sort of plug the hole if you're increasing it to 80%?
I'll let the Racing Minister talk about that.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Yes, currently 65% of the betting tax revenue doesn't go direct to the racing industry. Where does that money go, and then how do you hold?
Well, obviously, this is a new funding model. This is completely different to what it's been in the past. What we collect now through the levy will go all to racing. We collect the point of consumption tax. We've settled any issues with Tabcorp. They're going to inject, they'll be making an announcement soon in relation to those settlements. We'll have an infrastructure fund. It completely turns upside down the manner in which this is all done, and 80% of the POC then will go back into the industry, and as that pie grows, so will the amount that the racing get. This is unique. This is a really sustainable way forward for the racing industry, and it's great to be working with Treasury and with Racing Queensland as well and Tabcorp to make sure that we've not only got a level playing field now, but that there is sustainable long-term funding. And as the industry grows, all the benefits of the 58% growth, the revenue coming in, 80% of that will grow that pie, and that pie gets given to Racing Queensland. So I think the future looks extremely bright for racing here in the state, both at a metropolitan, but more importantly, at a regional and rural area.
Treasurer, can we ask some quick budget questions?
Yeah, sure. Might get some quick budget answers because you'll have to be waiting. But I want to acknowledge the presence here today of Pam O'Neill, one of the great contributors to racing in Queensland. Pam's the president of the Queensland Jockeys Association, and she worked so hard to change the rules when it came to ensuring women could race as jockeys in Queensland. So welcome, Pam, and thanks for your contribution not only to racing but to Queensland. Hayden.
We've got some record royalty exports. There's still thousands of people waiting for housing. We know we have a housing crisis in Queensland. What can they expect when we hand out the budget on June 21?
Well, as you know from last year, Hayden, we delivered the single greatest concentration of funding for housing in recent memory. $2.9 billion, $1.9 billion for our investment into social and affordable housing, and then $1 billion fund to provide certainty. Again, I've delivered a number of investments as Treasurer to provide funding certainty to entities and organisations, and so we'll draw that down going forward. But there's no simple answer to the housing challenge in Queensland. There's multiple levers that will be pulled. Councils have a role to play in the release of land and in planning approvals. The state has, of course, a role to play both in planning but also in investment. And then the federal government has a role to play as well. And of course, we'll be working with the federal government. We don't want to see the closure of the National Rental Affordability Scheme. We want to make sure that people can be supported. But this is a challenge, and an unanticipated challenge that came out of COVID. We're seeing the change in the formation of households in Queensland. We're seeing more people buying homes to live in them permanently and less people purchasing homes for the purpose of investment. So we're doing our bit. We're going to continue to do our bit, as well as looking at our growth areas in Queensland, and the Deputy Premier is leading that work as the Planning Minister to ensure we can release more land for housing across Queensland, and that they've made some good progress, particularly in projects like Caboolture West. So there'll be more that we will always do, but our commitment is to roll out the funds that we've provided. We're challenged, of course, in the construction market now. The pressure in construction is significant. The cost of construction, the inputs for construction, all the supply chains are under pressure, and the cost of housing has grown. We'll still continue to deliver, but we're already delivering that. We've announced our affordable housing investment program, a number of new construction sites happening a little way away from here in Fortitude Valley. And that's going to provide affordable housing for people who must work in the city, say a wardie at the Royal Brisbane Hospital or a paramedic. And then we've announced our deal with the Brisbane Housing Corporation, our first investment out of that Brisbane Housing Fund. And on top of that, the Minister for Housing, Leanne Enoch's, doing great work delivering the construction of more social and affordable housing. So there's more that we will deliver through those funds in the years to come.
Can I ask, Treasurer, do you have any sympathy for those Queenslanders, thousands of Queenslanders, still waiting to see whether they'll have their hotel quarantine doors waived? Why is it taking so long?
Well, you'll have to put the process question to the Minister for Health, but everyone who went into hotel quarantine knew what was going to happen. There was a fee that was to be paid, but of course we want to make sure that people who are facing hardship or difficult times, they are dealt with appropriately. And I know the Minister for Health and the team in Queensland Health will work through those applications as quickly as they can.
Those who can afford it should just pay up.
everyone who can afford it should pay their quarantine fee. That was very clear from the start. We made that very clear from the start of the pandemic, and everyone knew that there was a fee that would be applied for hotel quarantine. And of course, those Queenslanders or people entering in our state did their bit. The quarantine system, which we had to shoulder as a state for 120 years, quarantine has been the responsibility of the federal government, but the previous government failed to deliver effective quarantine mechanisms for our country. So the states again had to fill the gap, and of course that helped keep Queensland safe. And the reason we've got rebounding revenue lines, the reason that we've got royalties coming back, stamp duty coming back, state taxation coming back, is because we had one of the most open economies in the country. We've had one of the most successful economies in the country. We've generated more jobs in Queensland than any other part of the country and any other state, and we're very proud of that. But there are still challenges ahead, and so we call on people to obviously satisfy that requirement, that deal, but we'll look very favourably and generously to people who've fallen on hard times, who need support, and we'll work through those applications for exemptions as fast as we can through Queensland Health. All right, thanks everybody.